So if I were to title what I'm about to say, the title would be, "Thank you, Lord Balfour, we'll take it from here." And this is the key message. What really created the modern state of Israel, what continues to ensure the modern state of Israel, is deliberate Jewish action. Specifically, deliberate Zionist action. We can discuss the background. Everything is correct. British philo-Semitism, British anti-Semitism, British war interests. All of these things are correct. But the factor that made the difference was deliberate Jewish action. Without Chaim Weizmann, without the spirit of Zionism, inaugurated specifically 20 years before the Balfour Declaration, we would have still looked at British philo-Semitism, British anti-Semitism, British war interests, but no declaration. Because that is the factor that matters. And in many ways, what the Balfour Declaration represents is the success of the Zionist spirit. It is the first major diplomatic achievement of the Zionist movement. But it is an achievement that is due to a spirit that was inaugurated specifically in the first Zionist Congress. What is the Zionist spirit? The word has been, through deliberate effort, made so toxic. But if we remind ourselves what it really is all about, Zionism was about the fact that the Jewish people decided to be masters of their fate, to finally take action to change the course of their history, to say to the world that we might be dealt some of the worst cards in history and by a whole lot of dealers, but that does not mean that this is our future. And we are done praying for God to save us, and we are done waiting for the Messiah to come. We are going to be our own Messiahs. We are going to be the vehicles of our own redemption. This is the spirit of Zionism. The spirit of Zionism is the spirit of collective action for a purpose of self-redemption of a people, for themselves, by themselves. So the answer to why all of this happened is the Jews did it. Specifically, the Zionists did it. Every step on the way, from the first Zionist Congress all the way to the establishment of the State of Israel, every step was fragile. Nothing was guaranteed. Nothing preordained. Think of what the Balfour Declaration really says. Let's say you go to a powerful person with something you really want, and they tell you, "I like the idea, I'll do my best to help." How serious is that? Would you view that as the thing that makes it happen? That's what the Balfour Declaration is. It says, we like the idea, we'll do our best to help. In the background, we're making a whole lot of other commitments. But really, it's only the follow-up by the Zionists and the Jews that even made the Balfour Declaration, in retrospect, meaningful. I mean, as soon as Britain really got its hands on the land, it began to renege on its commitments in a process that became more and more problematic. It's only the Zionists and the Jews who made sure to come in, to establish self-rule, to make sure that these commitments entered into the international community at the time. The San Remo agreements, the League of Nations mandate, and by their following actions. The State of Israel existed in all but name and independence by 1939. And it was not thanks to British commitment. In fact, everything that happened in those years was because of Jewish and Zionist action against mounting odds, against the fact that both the British began to make it harder and harder and harder, literally closing the gates at the most critical moment for the Jewish people. Local opposition, rational, understood, but still has a responsibility. Local Arab opposition to the very idea of Jewish sovereignty in any part of the land. So everything that was achieved, everything that we have, and the lesson is through consistent, deliberate, focused Jewish action that was animated by a Zionist spirit that said, we are done entrusting our fate to others. Which is why the spirit of the Jewish people, through their actions, what followed Lord Balfour's declaration was, thank you, Lord Balfour, we'll take it from here. That was precisely how things happened. Now, why is it that this supposedly obvious story is not the one you hear? Well, I believe that this is where Zionism continues to present still the biggest challenge to a whole lot of people. The idea that the Jews have become masters of their fate. The idea that the Jews are acting like any other force in history, using diplomatic, economic, military means to pursue realpolitik goals. This idea still grates on the consciousness of wide swaths of peoples and civilizations. The only proper place for Jews in the consciousness of so many is as people who receive, people to whom something is given, people to whom compassion is shown. So the explanation of the birth of the modern state of Israel has to therefore be told as a series of handouts by foreign powers with shady motives. That's the only way you can explain it. So you need to say that Britain gave it over, right? And then you have a campaign for Britain to apologize. Certainly, if Britain has to apologize for anything, it is the betrayal of that initial commitment, which was not much of a commitment. But again, it's not about Britain. It's about the Jews and the Zionists who did it. With or without Britain, we would have achieved it. Because we were now pursuing our own goals. So we pursued them with the Ottoman Empire, with some success. And when the British became relevant, we pursued it with the British. And then when the Soviets became relevant, we got the assistance of the Soviets, and then the French, and then the Americans. But they are not the ones that matter. They're the ones that change. What matters is our deliberate action in pursuit of that goal. And this is where the story also of the state of Israel being born after the Holocaust, because supposedly some guilty European nations gave the miserable Jews some land to which they had no connection. So except for the fact that literally guilt is the last emotion that you witnessed among European nations after the Holocaust, this was not about anything given. This was about something attained. Israel existed in all but name and independence pre-World War II. And just as Pakistan and India did not need a genocide of a third of their people to attain independence and statehood, neither would we. We would have come into existence finally thanks to the dissolution of the British Empire. It is said that 4 empires had to disappear for the Jewish people to finally exercise their self-determination. Most peoples had to wait for one empire to disappear. We had to wait out 4. We had to wait the Austro-Hungarian Empire disappearing so that along with all its peoples, the Jewish people can finally name themselves as a people worthy of self-determination, for the Russian Empire to disappear, for us to be free of them, for the Ottoman Empire to disappear so that we could return to our land, and finally for the British Empire to disappear so that we would no longer depend on anyone to open or close our gates to our people. And the reason we have achieved everything we achieved is being focused, determined to wait out all these empires. And we were so focused about what we wanted to achieve that even though at the critical moment the United Nations, the heir of the League of Nations, said to us, well, guys, we're kind of reneging on a promise of our predecessor, the League of Nations. You're not getting all of the land from the river to the sea. You're getting half of it, mostly desert. And we know you're called the Zionist movement, but no Zion for you guys. You're not getting Jerusalem. And we know you're called the Jewish people, which literally in every language except French and English is the Judean people. Judah, Yehudim, Judea. So you are the Judean people. Judea is the cradle of your civilization. But no Judea for you. Judea will be part of the Arab state. So the Zionist leadership gets an offer, a proposal, a support, non-binding, an idea that says you can have the mastery of your fate, but without any of the lands, the areas that symbolize your culture and civilization, in only half of what was promised. And in one of the most remarkable moments, the Zionist leadership says yes. And it says yes because from 1897 to 1948 and on, it was focused, it was determined on the most important thing for the Jewish people, that we are finally masters of our fate, done entrusting who we are, how we operate, to the kindness, and mostly not so kindness, of strangers. So on this centennial, I do repeat, thank you, Lord Balfour, but we'll take it from here. Thank you.
I think with the time we have left, I think Einat wants to come in, especially on that third question. I've seen Crispin Blunt and some others who want to come in. I want to get one more round in and let the speakers come back. And I'll have a question for Jonathan because he's left out a bit here.
No,
so,
it's all right.
Einat.
So the question here has the answer for everything. Why can't Balfour serve as a basis for 2 states, for 2 peoples today? Because Balfour has the 2 elements that are still not accepted on the other side. That the Jewish people are a people, a nation, worthy of self-determination rather than a religious group, and that they have a historical connection to the land. These are the 2 things that are still not accepted. There is a lot of confusion in the things that were said. Israel was recognized, Israel was accepted. This was never the case because whenever there was recognition of Israel, it was always with a continued insistence on what the Arab side and the Palestinians call return, their demand for return, their claim that they have a right essentially to the state of Israel today, to put the Jews back in their proper place as a religious minority in an Arab state. So if the question's here, what more needs to be done? It's very simple. To achieve 2 states, and I would be very supportive of Britain declaring tomorrow it recognizes a state of Palestine in the West Bank and Gaza, if it did so with the clear declaration that just as it opposes Jewish claims east of the Green Line, the 1949 ceasefire line that separates the state of Israel from the West Bank, just as it denies and opposes Jewish claims east of the line in the form of settlements, it denies and opposes and rejects Arab-Palestinian claims west of the line in the form of this demand for return. As long as the Palestinians and Arabs persist in their maximalist claims, we will not be able to separate the land into a Jewish state of Israel and an Arab state of Palestine. Support for self-determination for the Jewish people in the land and support for self-determination for the Palestinians in the land has to come with the clear understanding that neither side can have it all. Broadly speaking, the Jews have understood it multiple times, from 1917 to 1937 to 1947 to 1968 to 2000 to 2008. The Jews have again and again said, yes, we have historical, legal claims. We have an emotional connection to Judea, the cradle of our civilization, and yet we are willing to forgo it in the understanding that there is another people here with an equal claim. The Arab Palestinians are yet to say yes to any proposal and agreement that says we understand that the Jews are an indigenous people here, no less than us, and indigenous people who have been exiled and come home, but indigenous. A people who have a legitimate, legal, historical, and emotional claim to the land. And therefore, they deserve something, and we deserve something. Our right is not superior and exclusive. Their right is not superior and exclusive. We are yet to hear a clear Arab-Palestinian declaration that says, we understand there will be no return west of the Green Line. We will have our state. We will realize our right to self-determination. And just as the Jews realized their right to self-determination and enacted a law of return for the Jewish people, when the state of Palestine declares independence, it will enact a law of return for the Palestinian people, but only and only into the state of Palestine in the West Bank and Gaza, and there is absolutely no claim and no right west of that line. When that happens, you will find that Balfour, and you're right, there will be peace tomorrow morning.
Thanks, Einat. Thanks very much. Right, if you bear with me, we have 5 minutes left. I have 2 questions I have to take, and I'm sure they're going to be addressed mostly to Elias and Einat. And then we're going to have to wrap up because we have to move on. And the 2 heavy hitters, I have first of all Crispin Blunt, who used to be the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and secondly I have the leader of my trade union, Len McCluskey of Unite. So we're going to take those 2 questions and then we're going to have answers, but please be brief with the questions if you can and brief with the answers. Thank you.
My question is to Einat. First of all, to say how much I enjoyed the presentation, saying that thank you, Lord Balfour, we'll take it from here. Do you agree with my instinct is that Israel, equipped with an unqualified security guarantee from the United States, has the power, the responsibility, but indeed the self-interest now to deliver the rest of the undelivered part of the Balfour Declaration?
Thanks. Before you answer, let's take Len. Len, your question?
Well, can I first of all say how incredibly interesting this morning's session has been. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. I think the doctor's already answered a central part of a question I was going to put to both herself and to the professor, which is, do they think that the British government should recognize the state of Palestine, like so many other nations have, without the preconditions that has just been put forward, as a way to moving to what was said this morning by Sir Simon, to bring about the second part of the declaration. And the other slight issue, I'd like to know what the doctor and the professor's view is of the whole question of the settlements, which is being described at the moment as conquest by concrete.
Thank you. If we take Einat first to answer those two questions, and then Elias will bring you in, and if you would like to also contribute then to you as well, then we'll wrap up. Einat, if you could be brief with your answers, please, because we're running out of time.
Recognition of the state of Palestine without a clear position that rejects the maximalist claim through the form of return into the state of Israel does nothing to further peace. It actually only pushes it away by actually kindling the hope and the idea that Israel can be rolled back, that the idea of Jewish sovereignty will not stand. So just as to your question on the settlements, I fully support the international community saying we recognize Jewish self-determination within the Green Line. But despite the historical connection between the Jews and Judea, we say it has to stop in the Green Line, and there cannot be a Jewish right to the territory of the West Bank. There has to be an equally forceful, powerful statement that says we recognize the Palestinian right to self-determination in the West Bank and Gaza, but we completely deny and reject any Arab-Palestinian maximalist claim west of the line. If you don't do these two elements, you have not contributed to a true goal of doing it as equals. Israel has, will, always did, continue to agree to divide the land between Jews and Arabs. The reason we have done it in the past, ruthlessly and effectively uprooted settlements, agreed to forgo Judea and Zion, the reason we have always agreed to divide the land is not because we're a lovely, nice, moral people, we're no better than anyone else, we're just as good and just as bad. We did it because we're small. We recognize that at the end of the day, we are a tiny minority in a region that is not very tolerant of minorities, and that our long-term existence depends on our acceptance as equals, as a people and a nation among the Arab and Muslim region, but only as equals, not as they used to think of it. So we are always willing, even now, to divide the land, but it has to be with our acceptance as an indigenous people with a legitimate claim to the land, who are there by right and as equals and have a right to sovereign self-determination. Once we hear that from the Arabs, clearly, simply, you will find that the Jewish people, Israel, and the Zionist leadership are as ready as they have always been and will always be to divide the land.
Thanks very much, Einat.